Hello, welcome to Studio Talks. My name's James Swift.
I'm Josh McNorton, and our guest today is...
My name's Vinny Peculiar.
Hey Vinny, you okay?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
I'm alright, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good too.
So when did you first start to write music, and what initially made you want to pursue it?
Well, I've been around a bit longer than you lads. So probably in the 1970s at school, I got into prog rock and folk rock, and music was a massive thing back in the day. I mean, it's still a massive thing now, but it was massive in a different way. It was much more tribal. You either went with the Motown soul, Northern soul people, or I got into rock music and folk music and guitars. I love guitars, so that's kind of how I got into music. But I didn't get into seriously writing songs probably till I was in my mid to late 20s, and even then it took a while to find a voice. I think that's what they say. It took a while, so I wasn't like a teenage prodigy or anything like that.
Did you? I mean, has music always had the thing with you? Do you think? Do you think you've always had a connection to music?
Yeah, my connection as I grew up. I grew up in a family of sort of radical Methodists. Really, my granddad was a preacher, and my dad was an organist. So I was at church every week of my life till I was about 15 or 16. When my dad said, "You don't have to go anymore," I said, "Oh, great, I won't then." And but you can't help not be influenced by church music, because I was subjected to a lot of hymns, and we used to put on a lot of shows up there as well. And so I suppose the church and hymns was a big. I'm going back. Obviously, that was a really early influence, and then moving on to discovering pop music. And Top of the Pops was always my ambition. I mean, I've lost a lot of ambition since it's not been on, to be honest. No, I'm only messing. But, that was always what, to me and my music-loving young mates, that was the big ambition. And seeing people like David Bowie and T-Rex and Free and Alice Cooper all on Top of the Pops was great. And because Top of the Pops was great in the sense that there was some brilliant people on there, and there was some rubbish people on there, so it was great. Phone at all the rubbish and wait for your band to come on. It's very different now. Obviously, we're much more interactive and selective and picking God knows what.
Yeah, definitely.
But, it was a very different time then in the 1970s. So,
the world we live in now, it's harder to get a good range like that with Top of the Pops. Where nowadays it's, as you say, it's more selective. Words. I'm going to listen to the music I like today. If that makes sense.
One of the things about listening to music today is, like, on things like Spotify, you can bring all kinds of genres together, can't you? So that's sometimes interesting, and the kids' record collections are the kind of the same as the parents now. You can borrow from any era, but when I was growing up, it was just what was coming out was new and exciting and charting. And we don't have the same relationship with the charts we used to have when I was a kid.
No, definitely not.
I think it's any worse or any better now. These things evolve.
It's one of those, isn't it? It has its pluses and its negatives.
So, how do you personally write your songs?
Well, sometimes I have a title, and I don't do anything with the title. So I can overhear someone say something, or something comes on the TV, or just pick up fragments of information and have a title, and then I will sometimes use that title to jam along to some acoustic guitar or some piano, and that becomes a phrase, and then I just build some chords around it. Or sometimes I write the whole sort of initial lyric idea. So I've got say 3 verses, and then I'll take that to the piano or the guitar and try and work up exactly what's working and what's not. So then I'll end up rewriting the lyrics and hopefully have a basic chord structure. And this sounds so boring, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't sound. It's incredibly interesting. But the other thing is, it's like, because when we ask this, a lot of people either side of what you've just said, they say one or the other. So it's like, has that evolved from one to the other? Is it still like a mixed bag?
It's still a bit mixed. Every now and again, every now and again I've had a song when I've sort of, the titles come and it's just kind of come out sort of almost automatically. But quite often there's a lot of faffing around with, oh, that doesn't fit there. Or, I think once I've got a basic chord structure, and all my songs are very simple, so it's usually just 3, 4, 5 chords. Hopefully, you know, I get a melody and a structure, you know, like a chorus, change of chords and all. I don't know what more I can say technically, because I'm not the most technical person in the world.
No, but so would you say that you're like a writer first, as opposed to a song, like as someone who is more technical with the actual songwriting?
Well, I suppose, I mean, songwriters come in lots of different guises, don't they? I mean, I like, you know, I've had a number of bands, so I suppose by default I'm a band arranger as well. So I kind of work out who needs to play what with people in bands and build up songs and ideas beyond just the melody and the chords. Because the song, basic structure of the song, it's just part of it. Because then you've got to have an arrangement, which is a whole different ballgame. So, you know, what kind of beat is going to work, and the bass part going to go, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it always broadens out, because most of my stuff, even if it starts on a piano or acoustic guitar, ends up with drums, bass, and, you know, sometimes in the past when someone's paid for it, strings. Real strings are hard, but now you can do a lot more with
MIDI and stuff like that.
With MIDI strings, and there's some very good sounding. I did a string-based track recently, and it was pretty good. I worked with this guy, and he saw some great sounds, and his cellos sound really good. They're on the next album, which comes out in March.
So you briefly mentioned about being in bands earlier. What was the origin of Parlour Flames?
The Parlour Flames band. That was me and Bonehead's band, yeah. Well, obviously he was the guitarist in Oasis, you know that? Yeah, people know that. So I got to know Bone through Mike Joyce, who was the drummer in the Smiths, and he was a drummer in my band for a bit.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and Andy Rourke and Craig Gannon, we used to rehearse at Salford Lads Club in Manchester for 3 or 4 years. So Mike knew Bonehead really well, and then got in touch with Bone because we just made an album, and he sent him. Mike Joyce sent Bone this album we'd made, because Mike was on a record called The Fall and Rise of Vinny Peculiar. It's a long time ago, 2006 or 7 or whenever it was. And Bone really liked the album, so I got to know him. And then, to cut a long story short, he managed the band briefly. Then he joined my band for a little tour and some dates in Europe, which were a lot of fun, but we weren't really built to last at that point. So at the end of that time, when he played bass, we said, oh, well, we should work together one day, and it took 3 years after that till 2012. And it was a great experience. You know, Bone is a great musician, and he had all his gear set up in the basement of his house, which was great. So we didn't have to rush that Parlour Flames album. It was done probably over a 9-month period, which is really rare for me, because I'm under the cosh for costs in the studio. I'm wondering how I'm ever going to get this back. I
was going to say, it takes me about 9 months. It takes me about 9 months to realise I want to write an album.
Yeah. Oh, does it? Oh, great. Yeah, I'm not.
Where did the name come from? If I can ask.
Parlour Flames, or Vinny Peculiar, or Parlour Flames.
Oh, actually, yeah, both. But I meant Parlour Flames. But yeah.
You know what? Well, Parlour Flames, I think I'm responsible for. Just you know what? I can't think of why now. But I know I thought it's something to do with watching some TV show on the Victorian parlour being the centre of home and creativity, and there's all these things going on, and Flames just sort of came after that. The problem with naming bands is finding you can come up with all these great names, and then you realise there's a band in Detroit that have been going for ages, and you can't read, because the internet just it's hard. So that was reasonably that was the best of the bunch we had, I think. It's all right. It doesn't glare out at you as
No. The first time, so the reason I asked was the first time I read it. So my brain makes connections, and like when I see something, I read something completely different, and then there's nothing I can do to stop it from saying that. So like the first time I ever read Parlour Flames on like a poster or something, I thought it was Paloma Pilots. And like just now when I was asking you the question, like what was the origin, I had like it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life to not say what's the origin of Paloma Pirates.
You do that sometimes, don't you? You just read them wrong, and once you've read them wrong once, I get that completely.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a theory. If I've got an English teaching friend who tells me about these kind of spelling theories that it's about recognition. When you look at a word, you only ever see 2 or 3 letters, and you kind of guess the rest.
Yeah,
which is why you can see some words, and have 3 letters, and you know the word, even though it's complicated. It's to do with the brain.
Definitely. So, where did you get the name Vinny Peculiar?
Oh, just from. There's a great Simon and Garfunkel song I liked when I was a kid called "A Most Peculiar Man," which is quite it's a folk ballad, but it's very dark. It's about a young man, a guy's isolation and suicide and all those kind of heavy things. But so Most Peculiar Man, and people, some of the songs that I was writing in probably the 90s or whenever, late 90s, people were saying, oh, they were funny, peculiar. So
right, okay.
Funny became Vinny, and the Most Peculiar Man thing.
Yeah. So
it just seemed like a name I could use as a band and as a solo artist. I didn't plan to be called Vinny. That was Mike Joyce's fault. And when the Smiths lads joined the band, they said, "Oh yeah, we're not calling you Alan Wilkes, guy. You can forget that. You're the singer." They said, "You got to be eccentric. We're not calling you that." So that's it, kind of stick.
I mean, what's wrong with the? That's okay. Okay.
So you just mentioned then about the solo and being a band. And what's the difference between both, like doing solo and being part of a band?
It is a kind of very different gig, because being in a band is more like being in a gang. Even if you're playing to not the size of crowd that you imagined, and you can still kind of like enjoy the rehearsal, and because every now and again, I mean, you do gigs with loads of people there and they're great, and then all of a sudden, this happened quite a lot with Parlour Flames. We'd do a Manchester sellout gig at the Deaf Institute, and then we went to Newcastle the next day and played to 16 people.
Oh.
But when it's a band, it's not so bad. But when you're on your own, sometimes, and that happens, the highs and lows seem more intense. That's how. Because
it's more, the percentage is more on you, isn't it? Like it's more.
Yeah.
If you're in a duo act, 50% of it is on you. Yeah. If you're in a band, 25%. But I see what you mean by that.
Kind of support each other's sort of anguish. Not anguish. You support each other's. If one band member's having a moan, someone else will say, "Well, look, it's not that bad. We could rehearse. We need to practice this one anyway, just because there's only like 20 people here. We've sold 50 tickets tomorrow night, 100 tickets, whatever." So but when you're on your own, I think the highs and lows are sometimes a bit more intense. I did a lot of gigs as a duo with a great keyboard player called Rob Steadman, who I've played in Witness with on a few occasions. And that was always good because we're both football fans, so we just talked about football a lot.
You just have to find that connection, don't you? You need to find something outside of music that you both enjoy, if that makes sense.
Football and pies. That was really wrong. You can find a pie shop in any town. He can find a pie minster in any city. Even ones that don't have them, he seems to find them. And at every festival that we did with Parlour Flames, we did a ton of festivals with them. He was always in charge of food. So it's being in a gang. It's like going out with your workmates wherever you work. Sometimes it can be fun, but it's called work. But there has to be some element which isn't just a grind. It's
Yeah, exactly. And do you find, as a solo artist, you have more like, do you enjoy the more creative control as opposed to being in a band?
Well, yeah, I suppose so. I mean, there's pluses to both, because for me, the way I work with the songs is I'll demo them all at home. So I'll do a basic drum and bass arrangement here, but then I send them off to the band, and then if we're going to, the way I've done the last few albums is then I'll go into the studio with the bass player and the drummer, and we'll just record the bass and drums. And that's always a very different thing. And then we maybe mess around with the arrangement or whatever. Especially, I know what you mean. I don't have this. I like it when people contribute their own particular flair. So with this band I've got at the moment here in Worcester, I do the songs at home and all the demoing. But when we go to rehearsal, if someone comes up with a fantastic fill or changes the bass part, it's all great, because you need all that in bands, So
Exactly, yeah.
If you can't really, unless you're Prince or James Brown, you can't really dictate. I know some people, when they get more successful, are a bit more dictatorial, but that's never been. It's not really my style anyway. I like the collaboration of music. It's good. It's exciting to hear what the musicians make of your ideas and kind of share them.
Moving back onto your solo stuff.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to write a concept album with Silver Medals?
Oh yeah, the Silver Medals album. Difficult. Well, what happened with that was because I had. Although I've been quite involved in music, I always hung on to a job. I had a part-time job right up until 2011 or something in the NHS. So, and I was full-time up until about 2005, but I was doing music, but I hung on in there in the NHS. And as soon as I got the opportunity to leave, I left. And the last thing in the world I thought I'd do is end up writing about when I was there. Yeah, I was thinking, oh, great, I'm leaving. Here comes the rock and roll dream, world domination.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out. But do you know what I mean? So I
know exactly what you mean.
It's quite a surprise, but I started. I wrote a couple of things, and I thought, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden, lots of ideas came, mostly based on the times when I worked in long stay hospitals. In the 80s and 90s, you see.
The first time, I think it was the first time I seen you play at the studio, you played a song where it's about a young couple who were together during when you worked there. And I really enjoyed the story of that, but also the song itself.
Were you sure it was from Silver Meadows?
And you said it was to do with the Institute.
Got you? Yeah. Well, there is a song. There's a song about a psychologist and someone with profound disability called "Waiting Games." That's called. Yeah.
Right. It
could have been that one, or it could have been.
I just remember you telling the story, and I was thinking that's a really lovely.
There's one about a savior of challenging behaviour. I might have done that one. I don't think the only couple one that I can think of is Jesus Stole My Girlfriend, which is a very old one.
Right. Okay.
Which is about a couple who split up because the man upstairs gets involved. So it wasn't that one. It was probably Waiting Games. The couple in question he's very profoundly disabled and he's in love with his therapist.
Right. Okay.
He can't tell her because of his disability. That's one of the songs. There is another one which is called Institution. Sorry, I'm just trying.
No, I remember the Institution. I've heard that one. It might have been that one because I know that
it was.
That was how you into.
Yeah,
it might have been that one. But yeah, I think it was.
In Institution, there's a couple. There's a couple of couple scenarios. There's a psychologist that takes some LSD and it's not very well. So,
right. Okay.
the institution. There's lots of little sort of stories going on, I think.
Do you call it a concept album, or is it just
Well, it's sort of. I called it a concept album because they're all the same thread, really. They're all stories about people who live in institutions, people who work there, people who've left there, bad things that have happened there, and okay things that have happened there. So it's like a social reflection of some of the feelings I had about being in those places as a nurse, you see, because some of it, they're not necessarily all the places I worked at, but certainly, it's a recipe for cruelty and neglect and some not very positive experiences for people who live there. They probably don't even have their own room. They're in huge dormitories and, not always properly medicated or have really opportunities, separate. These institutions are usually red brick and Victorian and out in the middle of nowhere where stuff can happen to people. People become very vulnerable, all that kind of stuff. So I try to reflect a bit of that as well.
Cool, brilliant.
So, just changing topic now, would you like to play us a song?
Oh, sure, yeah. I just happened to have my guitar on the floor. I hope it's still in tune. Long before you came on, the cat came in and I was so desperate to get fed, it jumped up and knocked the guitar up. And I suppose I better introduce it then. Okay, so recently I just put out a collection of 20 songs, like alternative versions and outtakes of songs that I that didn't really see the light of day at the time. And some of them are songs that are just alternative versions. But this is a song I wrote when I was going through a bit of a John Lennon phase about this was recorded in about 2009, I think. So I've not played it really since then. I've only really rediscovered it to put out as this kind of old stuff. So this will be fun because I've never really done it live at all. And it didn't make the record because I think we run out of time, like I alluded to earlier. Sometimes you can't afford to stay in the studio, and if you've only got half-finished songs. Anyway, it's kind of like, it sounds like a half-finished demo that's on this album, Peculiarities. But anyway, this has got John Lennon connotations, I guess. And it's called Imagine. There you go. Couldn't be more Lennon-esque, could it? Right, here we go. Imagine writing a song called Imagine. Can't imagine doing something like that. Sitting at the piano in a white suit, Japanese girlfriend, Simon's cat. He said it came together in the twinkling of an eye. The momentum of the melody was enough to make them cry. For the people, all those people, in the name of love and peace, politicians, world leaders, blacks and chiefs. Imagine writing a song called Imagine. Try and imagine doing something like that. In a dark room on an 8-track machine, on a country estate like the one we've all seen in the film of the song, the book of a dream, with that really weird kid in the kitchen scene. Is there anyone out there who doesn't know the words? Is there anyone still listening to them after all these years? Cause if any song was ever gonna change the world, It's this one. Imagine writing a song, just like imagine. That's the most stupid idea I ever heard. I'm not fighting in some war where everybody dies, or cheating on the good, telling superficial lies. I'm just trying to get my head around the greatest protest song ever written. Imagine writing a song called Imagine. I imagine doing something like that.
Well done. Our clap sound
Got through it?
pathetic.
It's
We
our
always-
first podcast back in a while.
Yeah. We always do claps at the end of someone playing, but they always sound like the most pathetic thing ever. It's like,
Yeah. It's like, well, you know, it was just nice to play that because
it was really lovely. That
I ran through it earlier and I haven't run because it's from like 2009. It's a funny song that it's like the idea that of all the protest songs to change the world, that should have changed the world by now, and of course it hasn't. Because actually, songs don't change the world. So
that's
something else.
interesting. That's really interesting. What is the song about?
Yeah, well, it's about it's a song about imagining yourself to be John Lennon in a way, to write a song that was so powerful and so iconic, and looking back on that song and seeing that it's probably not made quite the difference that you imagined it would. I mean, it's still a great song, and I some songs are just like timeless, and that's one of them. But you know, John Lennon was, I think, a genuinely sincere pacifist looking to change the world, and it's just, you know, people are going to keep on writing songs to try and reflect that and do that. But you know, in the end of this song of mine, it just seems like a stupid idea trying to write a protest song, simply because the greatest protest song ever didn't really change the world. Or did it? I mean, I don't know. It's just an interesting idea, you know, the whole idea of, you know, whether you know, art reflects or initiates change or just reflects what's going on anyway. And there's always a balance between the two, I think. Just how casual your language is, because I always remember doing a gig with Rob, the keyboard player I told you about. We did this great little gig in a music shop in Altrincham in the afternoon, and there was loads of kids' families there, kids and, you know, families and all that. And I'd go to start a song, and Rob would say, "No, you can't do that one."
Oh yeah, okay.
And then I'd say, "Oh yeah, maybe not." And then I'd go to another one. He said, "No, not that one either." And it was like, I didn't realise it.
Because in songwriting,
you have the odd profanity or...
Yeah, in songwriting, I think it's to build effect, isn't it, swearing? I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, in language in general, we use it to add a little bit more power to a sentence that otherwise might not have sounded as...
That's
Really?
going off at a slight tangent there.
No, it's completely accepted. What you just mentioned about John Lennon, it kind of made me ask a completely separate question. What would you say that your musical influences are, both as an artist and as a person, if that makes sense?
Well, I think when you've been around a long time, and, you know, I'm like in my early 60s now, so I'm cracking on. So you've heard a lot of music, but I suppose the early stuff was David Bowie and Paul Simon. They sound like opposite ends of the spectrum, but I kind of grew up on Paul Simon and then got into, I told you about the hymns, Paul Simon, David Bowie, Mark Bolan, glam rock. Buzz Cox, Elvis Costello. I'm just moving through the, Bunny Man Teardrops. So, moving through the eras, then there's a lot of music. My absolute favourite enduring artists are probably the Beatles. Are important. I didn't really get them when I was younger because I also got into heavy metal when I was like a teenager. And I think when you're young, you kind of think, well, that's my music. I hate that. I love that.
Yes.
It's much more polarized, isn't it? And it's like if you're a metalhead, you're just not even going to entertain anything else.
No.
Or if you're if you like ska and reggae, that people tend to get tribal when they're younger. But when you get, as your life moves on, you can like all. There's lots of different genres of music which are interesting, and I suppose if you're a musician, exploitable. I've done records which have a slight country twang. I've used pedal steel guitar players and things like that. But that was a long time ago, so I went through a bit of a phase of that. This last album I did, While You Still Can, is very hard rock. I moved back to the Midlands and I wanted to make a rock record because this is like the capital of rock. Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin.
What was
all come from here, and so I kind of wanted to reflect that with a lot of noise.
Right. I'm gonna get back to the questions in a second. I just thought of another question. What was like the last band you listened to or artist that you listened to that went that you thought that's quite good? I'm quite influenced to do something like that.
Well, I listened to Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull the other day for the first time in a long time. And it's an amazing album. It was recorded almost live. It's like 40 minutes long, and it's like a 40-minute concept album. I thought that was pretty good because I hadn't heard it. This is sometimes happens to me. I mean, I kind of I duck and dive into sort of various newer bits of music, and then every now and again I'll listen to something like Argus by Wishbone Ash, which was one of my favourite all-time albums. And the other afternoon I spent 2 hours recording the acoustic guitar part to the first track on Argus by Wishbone Ash, just to see if I could remember it.
Yeah.
So,
let's talk about peculiar. I can't say that word.
Peculiarities.
Yeah.
Peculiarities.
Yeah. Where did the inspiration come from to release a series of unreleased tracks?
Josh, it was. I just thought I'd got them knocking around, and I've been working on 2 other albums. There's a live album coming out soon. Just finishing off now. It's only 6 songs I recorded with my Worcester band in the studio live here. It's quite an ordeal because we all have to keep out of each other's way. It's the whole kind of lockdown recording thing. But we got it done, and the producer called Dave Draper is working with him to finish it off. And so there's a live album and there's like a studio album that I've almost done. I've mixed, and I've got like 7 out of the 12 tracks all ready, and the others are like I'm working with different people on them. So going back to this current one, I just thought this all sort of just keep things ticking along really until the other stuff come out. But then at the time when I put this out, I didn't realise we were going to have the opportunity to do a live album. So basically, I'm going to have 3 albums out in 6 months, but that's okay. I've just got to with this Peculiarities. It came out so quickly that I still haven't sent it off to various radio and press people. So if you know anyone who wants it, or if you want it, I'll send it. You're more than welcome. It's 20 tracks of nostalgia for me. So and there's a couple of Parlour Flame ones there. Not the alternative versions. The other thing that happens in that world is, when you're making records, you spend so much time fine tuning it, and then you put it out. It's all pristine, and people have put a lot of input in it. But then you look back at the mixes you did before you finished it off, and although they're a bit more rough and ready, sometimes they sound more emotionally engaged. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean.
They're not as pristine as the finished product, but they sometimes are better for that. So in this Peculiarities release, there's some of the tracks that there's some home demos and things that don't have all the kind of sonic veneer you kind of everyone likes when you have a finished album, but it's sometimes it's better without it, you know.
I have a thing where I'll write a song and I'll go, this doesn't fit with what I'm currently making. Like if I'm making like an album or something, I'll go, this doesn't quite fit with this album, I'll use it for later. And up until I do use that song, there's like a little bit of me that's guilt, and I'll go, it's a good song, I want to put it on something, I want to put it somewhere. Is there any songs on Peculiarities that's like that?
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's Imagine didn't really fit on the album, but well, it wasn't quite finished either. But that's it. I totally relate to that, James. That you all of a sudden you're working in one direction and something comes to you, and it's like, well, that isn't really part of that. But I mean, the trick is just to hang on to it, because
definitely.
And isn't it, because you're a songwriter? It's interesting. What's changed a lot of songwriting, I know it's changed it for me, is anytime I have an idea, now we've got phones. It's so different now. Years ago, you had an idea, you thought, oh God, run upstairs, switch my gear on, sit down.
Hope it doesn't go away.
Plug in, what is it? And sometimes you didn't have time to do that. But I mean, if you're walking to the bus stop and you think, oh, that's a good idea, you can record it. Sing into your phone now, and it's so much better now. It's so much more immediate. You have much more ideas. I mean, if I'm ever making albums, I scroll back through my phone, and okay, it's not all brilliant, but I record onto my phone at least every other day. I'll be putting down a few ideas, and then it just all builds up, and you've got a musical reference then if you haven't got the lyrics.
I think. And a piece of advice I always give people who wants to learn to write songs, well, not learn, who want to start writing songs, is I always say, don't be afraid to, in the middle of public, get your phone out and sing into it, because that's, if you don't do that, then you will not write. Yeah,
there is that thing about when the ideas come, you should try and strike while the iron's hot. That expression, because if you don't, the idea will just go and land on the neighbour or somewhere else. Someone else will get it.
I remember one time when I didn't have a phone at the time, and I had a song lyric in my head, and I was like, I need to write this down. I ran to the nearest Argos and got a pencil and wrote the lyrics down on a little bit of paper.
That's good. Yeah, well done. Well done. I mean, it takes some doing that. I mean, even waking up in the middle of the night, I mean, I've done that. I've woken up in the middle of the night thinking, particularly if you're in that zone where, with me, years ago, my girl, she used to go away for a couple of weeks most years to see her friends in America, and I'd kind of duck out. But I'd stay at home and write for the whole 2 weeks. I'd take 2 weeks off work. And once you're in that frame of mind, it's great. But if you wake up in the middle of the night and say to yourself, oh, yeah, I'll remember that for tomorrow, chances are you never will.
No.
You need to write it down. You need to seize the day. That's a good advice.
Really? It's my question.
Yes, it is, James.
So this one's kind of in two parts. How did you get involved with gigging in Widnes?
Gigging in Widnes. Well, I'm trying to think the first place I played in Widnes. I think it was a place called the Ring O' Bells.
It was indeed, I think, because I asked Greg. Yeah. And he said about the Ring of Bells, yeah.
Well, Greg is a terrific guy and a great songwriter. And that. I got to know Greg and Louise over the years. I got to know Greg firstly because I think Greg booked me for the Ring of Bells gig, and it became a regular gig on my. If I was ever doing a little tours or whatever, I think I've taken bands there. So I first got involved probably via Greg, playing just smaller gigs, and then later on played the studio. I think Parlour Flames played the studio as well.
I remember you playing the studio as Parlour Flames, and obviously as Vinny Peculiar.
Yeah.
So, what is your favourite memory playing at the studio?
At the studio?
Mm-hmm.
The studio, well, I think the Parlour Flames gig was good in the end. We had a few problems with sound, which all came good in the end. I thought it was a really nice gig. The studio, what I love about the studio isn't so much a memory about my gig, but all the other stuff that's going on there. So I played there when they've had like a theatre extract, different kinds of songwriters, somebody reading some poems. It's like, and what I like about the studio is it's sort of very eclectic, and there's lots of different arts type stuff that people can get involved with. So I've seen that. And Warren, of course, is a good friend of mine. Warren, what's Warren's surname? Warren the photographer.
Miller.
Warren Miller, yeah. So another great thing about playing in Widnes, and this is I'm quoting Greg Oldfield here. He said, "Oh yeah, it's definitely worth you doing." And he says, if the gig's rubbish, you'll get some great pictures.
That's a very.
And Warren has indeed taken some great pictures of.
He is a fantastic photographer. Warren.
Yeah, but I think it's got. I've also done I did a workshop for people looking at First World War stuff as well through the release. So I've done a few different things there that aren't just rock and roll things. They're more like sort of workshops. So.
What was it like? You just mentioned you just mentioned workshops. So what was it like to do a songwriting workshop?
In Widnes? I do them anyway. As
you've done one. I know the last one you did was in the Runcorn Library.
Oh yeah,
a couple of months ago. It was.
Well, that was one of the easiest ones I've ever done in my life. Simply because there's a very strong music community in Widnes, and pretty much everyone there knew what they were doing. So
yeah, definitely.
I sometimes you do workshops and people are. I'm a trustee of a mental health charity called Tonic Music for Mental Health. So some of them, obviously I haven't done them for ages since COVID, but the workshops I do with them tend to be for a whole variety of ability levels. So sometimes I do them in. I've been doing them in hospitals where it's a little more challenging and people are much more nervous and don't have the concentration span and probably recovering from long-term mental health issues or whatever their issues are. It's a very different kind of workshop. I think you have to kind of work people through at their own pace. But the pace of the Widnes workshop was really quick.
It really was.
And they were there's always a really strong music community in Widnes, and I think it's really healthy. And I think the studio is important because it's like the fulcrum of all the activities that take place. And it's a hard gig to keep it going,
Definitely, yeah. I know that one that you did, the last one we did, that one was very much, everyone just kind of already had ideas and they just kind of kicked off and did it and on their own. The first one of the first episodes we did was with Reese, and he played the song that he did that they wrote together. Reese and Keith, when they started writing a song together, and I think episode 3 or something like that. He's like, "This is the song I wrote." Vinny Peculiar. Yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah. What a nice. I mean, that is one of the great things about workshops. If you can bring people together and they kind of. There's a certain thing, isn't there? If you can just fuse with someone musically, it kind of gives you something to live for, kind of thing, and it can have a really positive effect on your sense of mental well-being.
Definitely.
Kind of what this charity is about that I'm part of.
Where do you see your music going in the future?
Well, I just take it release by release, and hopefully I can keep doing gigs. It's been a really difficult time in terms of. There's so many musician friends are up the creek, with the COVID thing. In terms of getting ongoing financial support. A lot of that's dying off now, so that's a real problem. I had a gig at in Thornton, Huff Village Club, which is a lovely gig not far away from you guys in on the Wirral. And that was due last Friday, but that got cancelled because of the new restrictions. So I have no idea when it's all going to start again, but hopefully I'll be able to do. Now I have a little band here. I'm trying to think about doing band gigs as well as solo ones.
So where can people find you online?
Well, there's a website, vinnypeculiar.com, and there's a Bandcamp page which has peculiarities. I've only done that through Bandcamp to start with. I may press something up if it's worth it, but because they're all older tracks, and then we'll see how we go with that. But it's the first digital only release I've done for a long time. So the last album sort of was on vinyl and CD, so that was putting the boat out a little bit for me. So this one, the boat's coming in just a little bit too, because there's no vinyl. It's all based around what goes in and what comes out. The balance of the resources.
Yeah, I think that's the smart option with everything that's going on, to kind of keep it digital, like with sending it off and stuff. Thank you for doing this, Vinny. It's been absolutely boss. I really enjoyed this.
It's been great, both James, Josh. Fantastic.
I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Take care.
Bye. You too. Bye.